If you've ever Googled how much do I need to retire in Canada, you've probably seen the same number over and over again. $2.5 million. And for a 50-something Canadian who just wants to stop working before their body gives out, that number might as well be 10 billion. It feels impossible. But here's the problem. That number almost never gets explained properly. And in Canada, it can be wildly wrong, sometimes far too high, and sometimes too low, depending on the lifestyle you want and how our retirement system actually works. Because unlike a lot of the advice you see online, Canadians don't retire on investments alone. CPP, OAS, taxes, and account strategy all change the math. So today we're going to break down where the famous $2.5 million number comes from, and what a realistic retirement at 55 might actually look like in Canada. Let's start with the feeling most people have. Retirement used to mean stopping work around 65. But many Canadians would prefer to stop earlier if they could. In reality, the average retirement age in Canada sits around 63 to 64. And a lot of people keep working not because they want to, but because they're worried about running out of money. That fear isn't irrational. Recent estimates suggest the average Canadian household over 65 spends roughly $60,000 per year. That's about $5,000 per month. Housing costs, groceries, utilities, insurance, none of those magically disappear when you retire. So when someone online says you need $2.5 million to retire, most people just shut down mentally, because it sounds so far away that it feels pointless to even try. But that number actually comes from a very simple piece of math. The famous $2.5 million estimate usually comes from something called the 4% rule. This idea comes from historical research on stock and bond portfolios. And the rule of thumb says that if you withdraw about 4% of your portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, your money historically lasted around 30 years in many scenarios. Well, people do a quick calculation. What do you want? $100,000 per year in retirement? You divide 100,000 by 0.04. That equals $2.5 million. That's it. It's where the number comes from. But here's what that simple calculation ignores. First, the research was based mostly on US market data and tax systems. Second, it assumes a 30-year retirement. If you retire at 55 instead of 65, your retirement could last 40 years or longer. And third, the biggest issue for Canadians, it ignores government pensions like CPP and OAS. Those payments dramatically change how much you personally need to have saved. So, instead of starting with a giant net worth target, a better place to begin is with spending. Instead of asking, how much money do I need? A better question is, how much do I want to spend each year without working? Let's look at 3 simple Canadian examples. First is a lean lifestyle. Imagine a single person living modestly in a smaller city with a paid-off home or very low housing costs. Their spending target might be around $35,000 per year. That's not luxury living, but it can support a comfortable, simple life. Second is a comfortable couple. This lifestyle targets roughly $60,000 per year, which is very close to the average spending of Canadian retiree households today. That might include normal housing costs, groceries, some travel, and hobbies. And third is a higher-end lifestyle. Think frequent travel, a nicer home, and more discretionary spending. That might land closer to $90,000 per year. Got these 3 levels. Give us a simple framework to understand how retirement math actually works in Canada. Because once you know the spending target, the rest becomes much clearer. Now let's talk about something many online calculators ignore: government pensions. If you've worked and contributed during your career, the Canada Pension Plan, or CPP, provides monthly income starting as early as age 60 or as late as 70. The maximum payment at 65 is around $1,400 per month today, but most people receive less. The average new retiree receives roughly $800 to $900 per month. On top of CPP, Canadians also receive Old Age Security, or OAS, starting at age 65 if they've lived in Canada long enough. That benefit is roughly $700+ per month at current levels. Put those together, and a typical Canadian might receive about $1,600 per month. That's roughly $19,000 per year. For a couple, the combined income could land somewhere around $35,000 to $40,000 annually. And that's important, because once you reach your mid-60s, a large portion of your retirement income might already be covered by government programs. But there's one catch. If you retire at 55, you don't receive CPP or OAS yet, which means you need savings to bridge that gap. Because early retirement lasts longer than 30 years, many planners prefer a slightly safer withdrawal rate around 3 to 3.5%. Let's use 3.5% for simple math. First scenario, a single person living on $35,000 per year. Once CPP and OAS begin around age 65, they might receive about $19,000 annually from government benefits. That leaves a gap of roughly $16,000 per year that must come from investments. At a 3.5% withdrawal rate, funding that gap requires around $460,000 invested. But remember the bridge period. From age 55 to 65, you still need the full $35,000 per year for 10 years. That's about $350,000. Add those together, and the rough ballpark lands around $800,000 in today's dollars. Now look at a comfortable couple spending $60,000 per year. If they receive about $38,000 combined from CPP and OAS after 65, their portfolio needs to supply roughly $22,000 annually at a 3.5% withdrawal rate. That requires about $630,000 invested. But again, we must fund the 10-year bridge. $60,000 per year for 10 years equals $600,000. Total rough savings target, about $1.2 to $1.3 million. Finally, the higher lifestyle. Couple spending $90,000 per year would still receive roughly $38,000. From CPP and OAS, that leaves about $52,000 coming from investments, at a 3.5% withdrawal rate that requires roughly $1.5 million invested. Add the $900,000 bridge for the first decade, and suddenly we're very close to 2.4 or 2.5 million, which means the scary internet number actually corresponds to a fairly high spending retirement. Not every retirement. Now let's talk about the tools that make this possible. In Canada, retirement planning is heavily shaped by 3 account types. First is the TFSA. The tax-free savings account is incredibly powerful for early retirement because withdrawals are completely tax-free. Even better, they don't count toward income when calculating things like OAS clawbacks. That makes TFSAs ideal for the 55 to 65 bridge years. Second is the RRSP. While you're working, RRSP contributions reduce your taxable income. Later, in your 50s or early 60s, you can gradually withdraw those funds when your tax bracket is lower. Some retirees intentionally melt down their RSP during these years before CPP and OAS begin. And third are non-registered investment accounts. These come into play once you've maxed out your TFSA and RRSP. With tax-efficient investments like ETFs, capital gains and dividends can still be relatively tax-friendly. The real strategy is sequencing. Build RRSP and TFSA balances while working. Use them to fund the early retirement years. And then let CPP and OAS cover a portion of spending later. There are a few mistakes that derail early retirement plans, surprisingly often. First is treating the 4% rule like a law of physics. It's only a guideline, and retiring at 55 usually requires more flexibility. Second is ignoring CPP and OAS entirely. Some calculators assume you'll receive nothing, while others assume you'll receive the maximum. Most Canadians end up somewhere in between. Third is underestimating the bridge years. Those 10 years before government pensions start are often the most financially demanding. Fourth is ignoring taxes. Large RSP balances can later force big taxable withdrawals that push retirees into higher tax brackets or even trigger OAS clawbacks. And finally, many people assume their spending will stay perfectly flat forever. In reality, some costs fall while others rise. Planning for flexibility matters far more than predicting the future perfectly. So can you retire in Canada at 55? For a lean lifestyle, the math might point to something closer to the high hundreds of thousands. For a comfortable couple, the number is often in the low millions. And for a lifestyle around $90,000 per year, that's when the famous $2.5 million target starts to make sense. The real danger isn't the number itself. It's letting someone else's number scare you into never building a plan at all. If you want more simple Canadian breakdowns like this, covering CPP, OAS, taxes, and investing, consider subscribing. And if early retirement is your goal, watch the next video where we break down how to design a simple withdrawal strategy using RRSPs. TFSAs, and regular investment accounts.